Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to another episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. As you may know, I lived way out in the countryside when I lived in Japan. I never really wanted to live in a big city, and I enjoyed it. I'd never heard of the place before I got there, but it quickly became my home, and I still think of it as such today. But the countryside is rife with creepy stories, and for good reason. In contrast to the much more well-populated cities, sometimes you can go seemingly hours without seeing anyone if you're out far enough, and you're always surrounded by mountains, rice fields, and rivers. Who knows what could be lurking out there away from human eyes? Our stories this week delve into some mysterious countryside lore and the monsters that are born there, real or otherwise. Our first story for this week features a mountain that not only children, but everyone is told to stay away from. Why? Because the mountain itself is cursed. Find out why in Cursed Village. I live in the city now, but I grew up in a small village as a child. There was a mountain to the rear of that village, and people claimed that it was cursed. You must never go there, my parents and grandparents always told me, and so of course, I didn't. If you went up the mountain, then apparently something bad would happen. That or you'd get lost. It was a famous ghost spot in our village, and nobody went there. But there was one person who did. A so-called traveller. I think the rumours of the mountain were only known in our village. We didn't have any souvenir stores, and, to speak honestly for a moment, everyone wondered why on earth anyone would travel to our village. They were also suspicious how the traveller reached the mountain. Yet, this traveller climbed it and came back down. Nothing bad happened. This traveller said that there was an abandoned shrine up on the mountain, along with a bunch of other stuff that made me think they really did go up there. One day at school, one of my friends started talking about the shrine on the mountain. He was suspicious and wondered why a mountain with a shrine on it would be cursed. Hearing him say it out loud, I wondered the same thing. That really was strange. We decided to go check the mountain out together. I don't think I was scared of it at the time because that traveller had gone up there safely and returned by themselves. The story of the curse had to be nothing more than a superstition. And so, that day after school, we set out for the mountain. I took bug spray, a torch, and some snacks with us. My friend came over to my house first, and then we left for the mountain. Of course, we didn't say anything to our parents. In the end, we climbed the mountain without anything strange happening to us. Maybe because we were feeling on top of the world. It was after school, and the sun was setting in the distance. As we were wondering if we might have some time to sit down and eat the snacks we'd brought, we safely arrived at the shrine. But once we got there, we started to regret it. I could feel someone looking at us from deep inside the shrine. We both froze. It felt like someone was looking at us, but it was difficult to say for certain. I didn't feel very good. My friend's face stiffened. I wanted to run, but when I tried to turn, my body refused to move. Shit, I thought. We were cursed and going to die. That was what I thought. I couldn't move and my head was spinning. Then something far in the distance banged loudly. It was like the sound of a hammer falling to the ground. The paralysis gripping us broke, and we both turned heel and ran from the shrine. We tripped over numerous trees as we ran, but we didn't fall. If we did, We feared it would be all over. And then I realized something. The sky, which until that point had been vaguely bright, was now wrapped in darkness. As my fear grew, I noticed something else strange. Something was chasing us from behind. No, not chasing. It caught up to us. The grass behind us rustled, and it was very clearly right there with us. And once it caught us, we'd be dead. I knew it. I quickly glanced behind us. A disgusting, mysterious black monkey was chasing after us. Its eyes were bloodshot. Die! Die! I thought. And somehow, we made it off the mountain. The black monkey stopped chasing us. I sighed, and on trembling legs, we returned home. Which is to say, my house was right there anyway. That night, everyone at home was, for some reason, dark. Especially my grandmother, who was muttering something. A prayer, maybe? Did she know? Had we been found out? I was worried, but she didn't say anything about it. The phone rang after dinner. I was still so frightened of the mountain that I couldn't leave my mother's side, so I overheard her on the phone. I listened in dumb shock. It was my friend's mother, the one I'd gone up the mountain with. He hadn't arrived home yet, and she wanted to know if he was at our house. It didn't make sense. I held his hand as we ran down the mountain, and now he was nowhere to be seen. That could only mean one thing. The mountain had spirited him away, right from my side. I couldn't say anything. My mother asked me if I knew anything, and I said I didn't. What a blatant lie. She hung up the phone. Apparently, my friend's mother had been crying. Guilt hung over me like a dark cloud. When I returned to the living room, my grandmother glared at me. Then she opened her mouth and said, "Did you go to the mountain?" For some reason, I nodded in agreement. That was the only thing I felt like I could do. Then she jumped up and at me with a speed I never expected from an old woman like her. "Why did you go up there? It's cursed. You've been possessed. It'll come for you soon." It would come for me? Did she mean the monkey? I was scared out of my wits. "Your friend went too, didn't he? He was taken instead of you." I passed out. When I heard that my friend had been taken in my place, everything in front of me went black. Coming back to the present, I'm thankful that nothing bad has happened to me since then. All I can do is apologize to my friend. That cursed mountain, it has a connection to our village. Apparently the villagers who lived here in the past were cannibals. Now it's almost a superstition, but the truth is that it's the villagers who are cursed, not the mountain, meaning me as well. The blood of those cannibals still runs deeply throughout our village, which the holy shrine on the mountain detests. I asked my grandmother what that meant, and she said the protection mechanisms of the shrine were too strong. Even though it looked abandoned and empty, those effects were still going strong. Meaning, if cursed people such as us went up there, something bad would happen to us. That was why nothing happened to the traveler. But my friend was taken in my place, and disaster befell him. So in the end, it wasn't the mountain that was cursed at all, and that monkey was probably a mountain spirit. I have no desire to return home for New Year's or Obon. I think if I ever go back there again, I'll be the next to die. Many villages have their own traditions, their own monsters that they tell their children about to keep them in line and stop them from straying too far. The kids in this next story, however, ignore those warnings and stumble across the remains of an old tradition that appears to have bred its own monster. Find out why in Deaf Cradler. This is a story my uncle used to tell me. Our family have long lived in Tokyo, but during the war, my grandmother and my uncle, who was in elementary school at the time, moved to stay with relatives in the countryside when the bombings started. My father wasn't yet born at the time. Even after the war ended, Tokyo wasn't a very safe place to be, so they didn't return right away. But while they were staying with relatives in the countryside, apparently a lot of strange things happened. Not just there, it happened all over the country. I've heard before that rumors of bizarre incidents often pop up around the changing of the times. My uncle and grandmother stayed in a small village in the countryside, and apparently, one day a large hole like a mouth suddenly appeared in the trunk of a sacred tree outside the village, and a carp, nearly 2 meters long, was spotted nearby as well. Numerous people also saw a parade of paper lanterns passing through the rice fields during the middle of the night, when nobody was outside. Although it seems like nonsense to us now, at the time they believed it to be the work of tanuki and kitsune. It was around that time my uncle said he ran into the Deaf Cradler. There was a large forest on the outskirts of the village, and they called it the Rainy Forest. Numerous people had experienced rain while inside the forest, yet, when they left, the sky was strangely sunny. My uncle said he found an abandoned village inside that forest, and he and his friends turned it into their secret hideout. There were 4 or 5 small houses close together, and of course, they kept it a secret from their parents. They would sword fight and play hide and seek, but one day they couldn't find one of their friends, and because the sun was starting to set, they began to panic. Apparently, leaving the rainy forest after the sun had gone down brought with it a peculiar type of fear. "Hey, come out!" They screamed in desperation, but they noticed something strange. They thought one of the boys had burst out crying, yet when they looked at each other, all of their faces were confused. Yet the crying voice got louder and louder, and they soon realized it was that of a baby. The baby cried violently, as though trying to warn them of some terrible impending danger. Their missing friend, who had been hiding in one of the houses as a prank, was so scared himself that he came running out. Then, as the sun started to set, a dark figure began to materialize in front of one of the houses. The figure appeared to be a silhouette cradling a baby on its back, but no matter how hard they looked, it didn't seem to be a shadow. It was something on the edge of both darkness and humanity, my uncle said. The sun was setting, and twilight covered the area. Fearing that the mirage-like shadow before them would change into something else, my uncle got goosebumps and grabbed his friends. They all ran out of there as fast as they could. They wanted to tell their parents about what had happened, but they kept quiet. There was a nice old guy by the name of Yoshino who lived nearby, so they went and told him about it instead. "Ah, that was perhaps the Deaf Cradler," he said. "According to what my grandmother told me, in the past, lots of babies died around there. There was a deaf mother who carried her child on her back, but the strings dislodged and she didn't notice. She continued cradling, unawares and unable to hear the child's screams because she was deaf. She cradled the child so much that it died. My uncle got chills. So sad. Killing the child she'd finally been blessed with must have been heartbreaking. And that's why she no doubt walks around even now, still cradling that baby. So that was the deaf cradler, my uncle muttered, to which the old man replied, "She's also called the Oni cradler." Oni cradler? I don't know why they call her that. But anyway, things like that often happened over there. My uncle understood that it must have been a village full of people like that. After things had calmed down, he returned to that village with his friends. They went around each house one by one, chanting and praying, and they put hard candy on the first floor of each house to appease the ghosts of the mothers and children. Then again, as they were playing and the sun began to set, something strange began to happen. It started to rain inside the forest, even though it had just been sunny and clear, and they could see the beautiful sunset. They ran through the rain, yet they soon lost their way and couldn't explain why. One of them called to go this way, another to go that way. "This is the way home, no doubt about it," my uncle said, who was like the leader of the group, but as he pointed through the forest, a baby suddenly started crying in that direction. One of the boys went pale. "That's the way we came from," he said. Rain dripped through the leaves and branches overhead as my uncle stood still on the spot. Everyone else covered their ears and drew away from the crying. "No, no! Don't be fooled! This is the way home! No doubt about it! That's the way back to the village!" my uncle screamed. The crying echoed unpleasantly, getting even louder as he spoke. He hit one of the other kids and dragged him with him. "Cover your ears! Just do it, and follow me!" They all walked towards the crying voice. Before long, they emerged from the trees and their usual spot outside the forest. Everyone immediately went their own ways home. "What about the rain? It wasn't raining when you got out?" I asked my uncle when he told me. "That part I just can't remember," he said, shaking his head. But that wasn't the end of it. My uncle ran home crying, and his mother asked him what was wrong when he got back. She apparently got really angry at him when she found out. Of course, it was forbidden to go into the forest, so she punished him severely. Then, he was called to the room of the family's head matron. When he sat down, she spoke to him. "That's not the work of the deaf cradler," she said. "That woman is also a distant relative of mine, but she was apparently a very strict woman." He didn't know who had told her, but she glared at him as she began her story. In the past, numerous children in that village had been killed to reduce the number of mouths to feed. This wasn't exclusive to this village and took place all over the country. It was something that needed to be done in times of poverty. Normally, this was done by strangling them soon after birth and making it seem like they were stillborn, but there were times when this had to be done when they were bigger as well. And so, like the deaf mother who accidentally cradled her baby to death, others did this on purpose to kill their child, pretending it was an accident as well. It was a sinful custom. And so, they called them the Oni cradlers, and people avoided them. It seems you held a funeral service for the children, but at that time, you felt the mother's emotions, didn't you? My uncle nodded before he could stop himself. All of the houses in that village suffered from great poverty. There is no doubt they carried out the Oni cradling there as well. Listen closely now. What you felt wasn't the mother's feelings, but rather that of the murdered children. They cried because they wanted to be saved, and when that didn't happen, their malice and crying voices turned into a curse that trapped their mothers' souls, forcing them to wander this world forever. My uncle said the hairs on his arm stood on end hearing that. So those voices they'd heard in the forest that time really were beckoning them. If they had gone back that way, then they would have been killed as well. Then the matron quietly said, "It is the duty of us women to pass down the tradition of Oni cradling. Men who are unable to give birth or kill must keep their mouths shut. They must see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil." Embarrassed, my uncle promised that he would forget all about it. As the times change and old legends and customs die out, strange things always happen, my uncle said again. Mountains, and particularly mountain passes in the middle of nowhere, are a perfect breeding ground for ghost stories. They're quiet, they're empty, they're creepy, and all it takes is one accident to give birth to an enduring legend. That's exactly what happens in this next tale. But is it really just a story? Or is there some truth to the tale people whisper late at night? Find out in Yonaki Ridge. "11 p.m. that night, K, S, and myself drove towards the ridge in question. I'd prepared myself because we're on the prefectural road, but things are actually going pretty smoothly, Kay said. I wasn't a local, so I'd never used the road, but it was true. The asphalt was relatively new. There were 2 lanes the entire way, and, to be honest, for a road leading to a ghost spot, it was actually a bit of a letdown. When I heard there were ghosts, I was excited and nervous about what we might see, how old the road must be. But this is it? This sucks. This sucks. Hey, you idiot, stop that! I looked over and Kay was shaking the driver's seat from the back. S was driving and I sat in the passenger's seat. It was S's father's car, only a small thing, and it swerved over the middle line. There were no other cars out. If there were, we no doubt would have already been dead. If we get into an accident and die here, then let's return as ghosts. Then this place will become a famous ghost spot countrywide, I said. Yeah, good idea, Kay laughed. S sighed in the driver's seat next to me. Kay and I were both drunk. He wasn't. We had been drinking at home, and it was the alcohol that prompted us to visit somewhere scary. S was immediately volunteered as driver. I mean, of course this road is well maintained. That's how much demand there is for it. Even from our city to the next, this road is the fastest way to get there. S, the only one of us not drunk, remained quiet. He seemed annoyed with something. His expression said he wanted to get away from these 2 idiots as soon as possible. Sorry, S. Still, despite how annoyed he was, he still hung out with us. That was just the type of guy he was. A good friend. My phone can record things. You reckon I can get the baby's voice on it? The audio quality on a phone is terrible. There's no way. You've got to be right up close to it or you won't hear anything. And what the hell do you want to do with a recording like that anyway? I said. Kay grinned. Well, you see... Yeah? You see, I'm gonna use it to scare girls. What else would I use it for? Jeez. His shout echoed throughout the car. They'll just think you forced a kid to cry and that'll be the end of it, stupid. S muttered beside me. Kay was too busy laughing and didn't hear him. The baby's voice Kay was referring to was part of the legend we were on our way to visit. The ridge full of abandoned cars. If you pass Yonaki Ridge late at night, you'll hear a baby's cries. It was a pretty famous story. Most people had heard of it, but whether it was a fake story, the truth, an auditory hallucination, or something else entirely, was another story altogether. According to the story I'd heard, one day a family went out driving, and they were about to pass the ridge. As they approached it, the engine suddenly stopped, and the car caught fire. The man and woman got out of the car and ran, but they left their baby behind in the car. Ever since then, when people passed through the ridge, they'd hear the cries of the baby. Not only that, but whoever heard the baby's cries would inevitably have an accident themselves soon thereafter as well. Hey, S, make sure you drive carefully on the way back, Kay said. S yawned at him. Come to think of it, when we called S on the phone, he sounded half asleep, so he was no doubt tired. Ghost stories are nothing more than embellishments upon embellishments, S said after he yawned. Huh? Kay and I looked at him and said together, if an accident happens here, it's the ghost's fault. And then after that is also the ghost's fault. And then after that. S stopped and yawned again. They're just embellishments, meaning there's no meat to the story. Remember that. And by the way, you two have been noisy as hell since we left. Kay and I looked at each other. We were so drunk we had no idea. Look, we're here. Before long we reached our destination on the ridge. S pulled over on the side of the road, and the three of us got out. The closest lights were far in the distance, making it darker than I thought it would be. S returned to the car and came back with a torch. The white light from the bulb lit up Yonaki Ridge. How can I put it? There was a peculiar atmosphere around the place that was fitting for a ghost spot. Both sides of the road were lined with heavy trees, and the wind rustled loudly through them. At some point, the chatty Kay had shut up. What now? S said. It seemed like he wanted to say, let's get out of here quickly, I want to go home. For me, the night wind and the atmosphere surrounding the place had sobered me right up, and I was scared and wanted to go home too. Yeah, doesn't look like there's anything here, I said. I was about to suggest we go home when Kay said something. Shit. I heard it. I was about to ask him what he heard when I heard it too. It sounded like a cat, but it wasn't a cat. Cats didn't cry like, oh yeah, oh yeah. It was a human voice. A baby crying. Hey, no way. Kay looked flustered. I felt even more flustered. S seemed to have heard it as well. "It's coming from over there," he said, and then turned the torch towards it. A single-lane road extended from the other side. The same road S shone the torch down. "All right, let's go." Kay and I looked at each other as S started walking towards the road. He had once again shown his true character. S had both the car keys and the torch, so we panicked and ran after him. There was a small open space at the end of the road. S shone the torch over it. Wild grass grew here and there, and the area was surrounded by numerous abandoned cars. There were old rusty trucks and newer cars as well. The baby's cries got louder. Standing behind S, I thought I might cry as well. Kay kept repeating, "Shit, shit," over and over. S shone the light on a single car. It was pure black, both inside and out. The window glass was gone. He moved the light to just beside the car. A child's baby seat. There was a baby seat on the ground beside the car. The disparity between it and the old car was shocking. The seat looked brand new. The cries were coming from that seat. Nobody was sitting in it. S took a step towards it. "Hey, S, it's dangerous. I said it's dangerous." Kay tried to stop him, but S continued towards the seat, and then reached out with a hand into the bushes behind it. At that very moment, I thought the owner of the voice would swallow him whole. I really did. "There we go." We turned our gaze towards S's hand, and he pulled out a small machine of some type. We stood there frozen and dumbfounded as he pushed a button on top of it. The baby's cries stopped immediately. "It's a CD player," he said. At first I was surprised as well, but that was because the same cries were repeating. I thought it might have been something like this. "It's just a prank. It plays the same baby cries over and over until the batteries die." I was shocked. Kay was flabbergasted. S, just how level-headed was he? "Oh my God, are you serious? How stupid!" Kay grabbed his head with both hands and started moving around in his own special way. He was no doubt embarrassed. "I'm such an idiot. Shit, I'm an idiot." He approached the baby seat and kicked it. "Oi, take a photo," he said, and sat in the seat. A grown man sitting on a baby seat. In the middle of the night, in a place like this. The hilarious sight before me dispelled any fear I had left, and I laughed. "You're such an idiot," S said, taking out his phone and taking a photo. "Wah! Wah!" Kay screamed. He kicked his arms and legs in the air, and I laughed again. I think S did too. "Wah! Wah! Wah!" Yet, it was at that moment that I started to sense something strange. "Wah! Wah! Wah!" "Hey, Kay, that's enough. We've taken enough photos already." But Kay wouldn't stop crying. In fact, he started crying even harder. "Hey, Kay?" That wasn't his normal voice. Real tears streamed down his cheeks as well. His face twisted and warped. His limbs flapped about as he screamed and cried. It was Kay's voice, yet at the same time it sounded like a real baby crying. "Hey, hey, Kay?" I reached out my hand towards him, but S came in from the side and kicked the chair out from beneath him. "Hey, grab Kay, we're getting out of here," S screamed. Kay lay on the ground unconscious. Both of us grabbed him and ran straight back towards the car. S, what's going on? Don't ask me. We pushed Kay into the back seat, and then S turned the key. Hey, S, hang on. The car started, but I suddenly remembered the story about Yonaki Ridge. Once you heard the baby's cries, you would... S seemed to remember it as well. His hand reaching for the handbrake stopped, but only for a moment. It's just an embellishment. The car took off. In contrast to the large beads of sweat forming on his brow, S drove the car carefully and slowly down the hill. By the time we reached the bottom, Kay had woken up again. We were worried about what to do if Kay started crying again, but thankfully, he was himself. Huh? What's this? Ugh, my sides really hurt. That was because S had kicked him. Or so we thought. But it turned out to be the work of the baby's ghost. He had bite marks all over his sides. Even so, we were able to safely return home without getting into an accident. The three of us gathered again a few days later, and through the friend of a friend of a friend who knew someone, we went to a far-off shrine to be cleansed. For now, the three of you are fine, but I recommend not going back to that ridge again, the priest said to us. Whether the purification worked or whether there was nothing haunting us to begin with, several years have passed since that accident, and all three of us are still alive. Even now, we still hear stories of people who passed through Yonaki Ridge and heard the cries of a baby. Apparently, one of the guys from my work passed by there the other day with his girlfriend, and they said they heard it as well. Then he continued. We didn't have an accident or anything, but look, my sides. They're covered in bites, see? No doubt about it. His sides really were covered in bite marks. I was at a loss whether I should laugh it away as nothing but an embellishment or not. We're not done with the mountains yet. The protagonist of this next tale likes to take part in street racing at his local mountain pass, and he's not the only one. But something's about to happen that will make these street racers question their future choices. Find out why in Deja-vu on the Turn. When I was younger, I took part in street racing. Every weekend I'd head out to the mountain pass with my buddies, and we'd speed around and around it. This pass was especially famous for street racing, and every weekend you'd find all sorts of people gathered there. Street racers always had all sorts of mods on their cars, so you could tell them immediately at a glance. We'd chat and then race each other. Good times were had. One weekend, my buddy and I drove up there as usual in our cars, and one car was already there. As we got closer, we saw that it wasn't a street racing car, but a normal car, so we ignored it and stopped at the small open area nearby, grabbing some drinks from the vending machine. "Nobody's here today, huh?" my friend said, taking a sip of his coffee. "If we drive around for a bit, someone's bound to show up," I said. I took off first, and my friend followed about 5 minutes later. As we approached the foot of the mountain, I reached the large curve and suddenly slammed on the brakes. That car we had seen earlier was there, stopped in the middle of the road. I got out of the car to give him a piece of my mind. Stopping in a place like that was dangerous. There were 2 men inside. "What the hell are you doing stopping in a place like this? I could have hit you." "A car just drove over the edge." they said. Was it your friend? No, I said. He left 5 minutes after me. There's nobody out today, so there shouldn't be anyone down here. According to the guy inside the car, they were driving down the mountain pass when another car overtook them at high speed. The car wasn't able to turn in time and went over the edge. Before long, I heard the sound of a car suddenly braking behind us, and then my friend's angry voice. "What the hell are you doing stopped here? I thought I was gonna hit you." He came over to join us, and we shone a light over the edge to see if a car was there. "It's probably just a misunderstanding," I said, but the man insisted. "I saw the lights in the curved mirror, and we heard the sound of a car crashing." The other car then left, but for us, our race was more important, so we ignored what happened and got back in our cars to start again. This time, my friend went first, and 5 minutes later, I followed him. "If that car is stopped on the road again, I'll hit him this time," he said before taking off down the mountain. 5 minutes passed, and then I took off towards the bottom of the mountain myself at full speed. I rounded the corner nicely, and then, as I approached an even bigger curve, lights flashed at me from the other side. This time, it looked like a street racing car, and they were flashing their lights as a sign of danger. "Again?" I thought, disappointed. I slowed down as I approached the curve and asked, "What's wrong?" "A car just drove over the edge. Was it your friend?" I was at a loss for words. I looked over and the guardrail was destroyed. Something had clearly gone through it, and there was a car lying at the bottom. The police and an ambulance arrived, and according to them, it was indeed my friend who had driven over the edge. He died instantly. Even now, I still can't forget what the officer said to me. There have been a lot of accidents here lately. After some of you street racers forced a normal car with 2 men over this same corner, this marks the 3rd such accident. I couldn't tell him about the 2 men I'd spoken to earlier. I stopped racing after that, and I haven't been back to that mountain pass since. And that's all for this week. Don't forget, you can pick up Sumikoa, The Haunting of Higanbana Heights on Amazon right now. And make sure to follow us on YouTube for even more terrifying stories each and every day. You can find us at youtube.com/Kowabana Japan. We also have over 100 exclusive bonus episodes over on our Patreon that you can start listening to right now and help support this show. You can find that at patreon.com/Tara A. Thanks guys. Stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.